So I'm really excited to actually just really help to provide a platform for Katie to tell the story of how they at 3M have utilized rehearsal. It's been Katie, I know it's been a really long journey for you personally, and for 3M and the work that you've done there. So Katie has been doing this for Katie. You're probably gonna have to correct me, at least 5 years, maybe even more.
5 to 6 years at least. Yeah. We'll just stick with 5.
Yeah, sure. Nice round number, right? That's right. And so it's just, Katie brings just a massive amount of experience in having spent so many years. And I say that, genuinely, so many years just really working through implementing rehearsal at what was a smaller, well, maybe I shouldn't say smaller because it was quite a large sales force that you worked with, but with a company that was then acquired by 3M, and being able to bring the technology of rehearsal and the concepts of video-based practice into 3M. And so Katie, I say this all because Katie just has a massive amount of experience. I would say this is a really great opportunity for anybody who has a lot of questions about how to do this well, to make sure you get those into chat, just so that we can answer them, because Katie's got just a great story to tell. So Katie, thank you so much for being here and being with us and sharing your story and your expertise.
Of course. I'm kind of jealous I don't have the fire on my side though.
I know, I was gonna say, I'll keep myself really warm by my fire. Derek gave me a hard time. He wasn't sure how I was gonna pull this off, but so.
I'm impressed.
Katie, this is funny because we actually have the opportunity to introduce Katie a little bit in her current role, but she's actually even moving on to a bigger role. So Katie, I think currently you're the e-learning specialist for the 3M Healthcare Medical Solutions divisions, but you are actually going on to lead a global implementation of an LMS. So first, congratulations.
Thank you.
I imagine that's exciting. Obviously, you are taking what you've done with rehearsal and expanding that even broader.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's been kind of eye-opening coming. We were a very small company that was acquired by 3M, and it's been very eye-opening to see how a very large company does e-learning, and it has been very piecemeal. Like every division kind of had their own solution, and so now they're moving to one solution for the entire company. And so I think it's going to be much better because, right, we can utilize things that other divisions have created and done, things that we're using here in the medical solutions division, like rehearsal, and show it to a broader audience that will hopefully benefit from it.
Yeah, that's exciting. We were sad to see that we will probably lose the close relationship that we've had with Katie, but very excited for you that you're going on to an even larger role at the organization. So
thank you. It's bittersweet for sure.
Yes. So, Katie, we're here to just talk a little bit about how and why 3M uses video-based practice. And we're going to talk about that specific as well to the industry that you guys have operated in, which is a really technical industry, but also highly regulated. And that adds some additional components to how rehearsal has proven to be helpful and beneficial, and challenges that you've had to overcome a little bit. Maybe start just by telling us a little bit about what makes the medical space challenging from a sales enablement perspective.
That's a great question. So we are specifically medical device sales. And so, everything that we say is regulated by the FDA here in the United States. And so we have to be very particular about the way that our sales reps speak to products, about what they say that the product will do and will not do. We can't be out there saying that everything's going to cure cancer and make you 100% whole. We have to be very, very careful. And so when it comes to messaging, we want to make sure that what our sales reps are telling these clinicians is 100% accurate, that it goes exactly with our claims and what we're approved to say, and never varies even a little bit, because we would never want to give a false impression of what our devices can do. And so we just have to make sure that they're accurate, I guess is the best word.
Yeah. Maybe how has not only that regulation, but also the highly technical nature of what you guys do, what you guys sell, and the issues that you address, how also has that sort of really played in to the concepts of role play?
So, whenever you're learning about a new product, so we're kind of in the wound care space for the majority of our devices. And so the way that wounds heal and the way that our products promote that healing is very specific. And a lot of times it's newer science, and sometimes even surgeons and clinicians are aware of. We have a lot of clinical studies that really talk about the wound healing process and really demonstrate that. And so, whenever they're articulating what a product does, they have to be very specific in the ways that the products work on the wounds and that the wound itself is going to heal. And so, if without practice, right? I mean, we can tell them, we can show them in brochures, we can, walk them through how the products work, but without practicing articulating it, I mean, we're talking to highly degreed individuals, and they have to be able to really speak to what the product is doing in an educated and coherent way in order for it to make sense to the clinicians.
Yeah, that I think that's a really great element of it, right, Katie? And one I'm going to use to kind of transition and talk a little bit about sort of, the early days of role play when you guys implemented rehearsal, just sort of everything that was going on. The fact that you are talking to people who are highly educated, and you've got to get sales reps up to that level. Talk a little bit about just kind of role play in general at 3M, sort of how things started for you guys in the sense of, why rehearsal specifically in the early days in thinking, gosh, we need a video-based role play element to our trainings.
So way back before we were 3M, my company was called KCI, and I joined the sales team as an e-learning specialist. And we were talking about, when they were new hire training, they did a couple of role plays while they were face to face. You remember those days, right? Face to face. It's been a while. And they did their new hire training, and then we would have a big national sales meeting in January, and then a smaller, like kind of regional meeting in July. And that was really the only times that they were ever face to face with somebody and practicing. And of course, managers go on ride-alongs, but they're in front of customers when they're doing that. And so if they're saying something incorrect, it's, like you're in front of the customer, you can't really stop them and coach them right there. So we were realizing that we really only had these like 3 touch points as far as practice goes. And so we started looking for a way to do it. And I was tasked to find a solution. And, it was back when video role play was really in its infancy. There weren't a lot of options. I don't know that there really are any better options now, but we found rehearsal, and it was super easy to use. And it solved this problem because now, we could have the reps practicing. We've got reps across the country, right? And we're US and Canada, so even into 2 countries. And it's not feasible to be face to face. So with rehearsal, they were able to practice, and then the video went straight to their manager. And so the manager was able to give feedback. And it just really let us get more eyes on what they were saying. It really gave the managers more opportunities to give coaching and feedback when the customers weren't right in front of them. And it was less expensive, right? Because there's no travel involved. We're not taking up our time at our big national sales meetings. So it was just kind of a win-win situation. And then when we proposed it to our executive leadership, their minds were blown by this concept. And they even caught on to something that we hadn't really been thinking about. They were able to get into the system and see the managers coaching. So they were even able to then coach their managers on better feedback and better ways to provide that feedback. So it really ended up being an even more multi-tiered solution than even we were going for initially.
Yeah. Katie, it's like you read my mind here on that one. I was going to talk a little bit about you've talked a lot to us and to other folks about the importance of leadership buy-in, and sort of how that really helped to amplify the use of it. Speak maybe just a little bit to that, in the sense of, like you said, sort of what was that effort like, taking this, sort of what you had been doing a little bit in this kind of virtual role play world, and sort of taking it to sales leadership and saying, hey, look at what we've been doing. Talk a little bit about that process, what you took to them, their initial reaction to it, and then, sort of how that managed to actually sort of ignite and take fire even more so.
So, I think the most recent thing is when 3M was acquired, not the way it happens. When KCI was acquired by 3M, KCI had been using it, about 3 years or so by that time. And our sales leadership loved it. We'd seen it work. We'd been using it for a while. Like, everybody was kind of sold on it, right? Well, then, this big company acquires us, and we actually brought in the larger portion of the sales force. It's very strange, I know. But so, we bring in all these sales reps who are used to doing video role play, and they, bless their hearts, they did a video kind of role play, and they would have their reps video themselves, and then they would like upload it onto a SharePoint folder. And then one person on the training team would then like put all those videos together into another folder and then share that folder with the manager. It was so manual. It was so time consuming. They did it like once a year because it was such a horrible way to do it.
Yeah.
And so here we roll in and we're like, hey, look what we've got. So I think, they already knew the value of of practice, right? But they just didn't have a way to really do it. And look, let's be honest, Rehearsal's not the cheapest platform. It's not the cheapest platform we have. We have several e-learning platforms, and it's not a cheap solution, but it's one that works, and it's one that's easy to use, which for me, being the key administrator, is huge, because I'm the one who deals with it whenever it doesn't work, and I have systems that don't work. But they saw, like, beyond the price tag, they saw the value, because I could say, we're not traveling to see, the managers aren't having to travel as much to coach. This was back when we could travel, y'all. They, at our national sales meeting, we were taking half a day of our national meeting. I mean, this is a huge meeting, and doing role plays, face-to-face role plays. Well, now we can take back that time and use it for other training content that would be more valuable, hands-on, other things that you kind of have to do face-to-face. And then, we could get that time back. And then again, with now you can see what your managers are saying. So we kind of have that dual level of oversight or review, whatever you want to call it. And it really was a no-brainer. Like, once they understood how it worked and the purpose, the cost just made sense, because number one, we're saving money, right, from not having to do it at the national meeting, but also how much more are we making with reps who are better spoken, better prepared, know what they're saying that much more clearly. So I think it's just such a logical solution that it really wasn't that hard to get their buy-in.
Yeah. Gosh, I had a question a little bit in sort of the mechanics of it. I think, Katie, you talked about the fact that there was a culture there that existed at 3M, at least around this concept of role play. And they did it a little bit. I think you said maybe, once or twice a year. They did it a couple times. Talk a little bit about, because I don't think that you guys, I would not suggest that 3M does an excessive amount, right? There's always this question of balance. This is good, valuable time to be doing these kinds of things, doing role plays and coaching. But at the same time, we all know that there are competing interests at play for sales reps' times and managers' times. Maybe talk a little bit about sort of how you guys have thought about that issue and balancing the ask in sort of balancing the amount of time that they do spend time doing role plays, but that provides the best benefit for sort of how you see that time that they're then expanding doing that as opposed to doing actually selling activities. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, sort of how you guys work through what's the right balance with such a large organization?
Absolutely. And it's evolved, right? So we've been doing this for a long time now. And we've figured out kind of what works for us and what didn't. We initially, when we first implemented the platform, our goal was to put out one role play a month. We feel like it takes about 30 minutes of the rep's time and then about 1 to 2 hours of the manager's time, just depending on the size of their teams.
Yep.
And so we felt that, you know, that amount of time per month was a reasonable amount. And it was in the beginning. But then what we realized was we didn't really have enough content for them to be practicing. It kind of got a little repetitive. And so after a little while, we ended up moving to a quarterly approach, to where we do one role play a quarter, in addition to role plays that they do in their new hire training. They do 3 to 4 and during new hire training as well, which their training is like a 2-ish month process. So in that 2 months, they do 3 to 4 role plays, as well as then one per quarter for the rest of their tenure. And that's been a good balance. It gives us time when, you know, there's typically either been a product launch or a new claim or a new clinical study, or even a new competitive threat, right? That happens. And so it really gives us time to figure out what we want that messaging to be and what we want the reps to say or practice, and really lets them do that. And then if we do have something that comes up in between, we'll definitely do more, but that's kind of our goal that we set for ourselves, is to do one per quarter. And that's been working. I think we're probably at about 1.5 years that we've been doing that now. And it's been a very good cadence. It feels natural at this point.
Yeah. And Katie, you talked a little bit about it just in that answer, but tell everybody a little bit of sense of sort of what kinds of, for those reps that are already in the field, right? So the reps who have gone through or who are going through some onboarding training, they're going to probably have a specific set of content and topics to visit through that onboarding. And maybe we'll put that aside just for a moment. We can talk about that. But talk to us a little bit about, what do you ask people to do role plays around on that sort of quarterly basis, plus any kind of one-offs? You know, where do you guys tend to focus the effort with the sales force in this tool?
So I think for us, it tends to be a lot of clinical evidence, making sure, you know, I don't know if you've ever read a clinical study, but they're dense. There's a lot of stuff in there, and you know, we train them on how to read them and how to understand them, but understanding it and then speaking to it is different. And I think the thing for us is we want clinicians to see the clinical value of our products. And so that is one of the things that we really have them practice probably the most, is their clinical messaging. But we also do competitive threats as well. So if we know that there's, you know, a competitor who's got a new product to market that's going to be directly competing, or they think is going to be directly competing, then we will use that as a way to have the reps practice, you know, before, hopefully is the goal, right? Before they see that threat in their territory, they'll already know kind of where we stand in relation to that new product or to these new claims, and we'll be able to message appropriately.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, you know, again, I think that's important, especially for those who were listening previously. You know, Jeff talks a lot about in his demos, specific sales skills, right? And so that's one thing we naturally think of, but also I think, Katie, you know, again, not that you guys don't address that, but you guys use it a lot in those areas and examples that you talked about, sort of being able to product message well and to handle competitive threats. So I think, you know, again, you guys just have such a strong use case around the value of rehearsal in those elements as well. And can you talk a little bit about, Katie, too, just sort of from the use of rehearsal in the onboarding, just touch a little bit on that, or just sort of your new hire training components. What do you guys focus on in that particular area?
So for us, it's basically making sure that they understand the core premise of our products, right? So we deal with negative pressure wound therapy, and you really have to kind of understand, again, how a wound heals, how negative pressure really works. And in order to understand some of the more advanced products that, help with incisions and trauma and, other more graphic medical things. And so when they're in new hire training, we want to make sure, do you understand the basic premise of how this therapy works, why it works, what exactly it's doing? And we actually do that before they come to their first live training, because it gives us a chance as trainers to say, okay, they're understanding their e-learning, because they always go through e-learning content before they come to live training. So they've got a clue, right? Are they understanding the things that they're learning? Are they kind of not picking it up as quickly? And then they have a field trainer who works with them one-on-one, and who actually will review that video too and say, hey, great job doing this part, but you forgot this whole other piece that's really important, or like our key messaging, whatever it is. So it really gives us a way to make sure that they're at a good level. So when they come into live training, they're already starting ahead, right? We don't have to go over those basics. We don't have to do that introductory stuff. They've already gotten all that. They've already practiced it. Now let's get them with their hands on the products. Let's get them really like figuring out the nitty gritty of it.
Yep. And I think that's I think that's just a really good example of being able to utilize rehearsal. I mean, I think a lot of clients would maybe be hesitant to use it so early on in a sort of a new hire process. But again, I think your approach to thinking about how it's being utilized is very important there, where you're thinking about, okay, we want to use it to just genuinely evaluate, but also just help develop that baseline that we need so that we can build on top of that real easily and quickly when they do those live trainings, and when they do come to sort of the in-person things.
Well, I wish it was in person, but
well, that's true, right? Maybe I'm envisioning the day when we get back to that, right? Since we're certainly not there yet anymore.
Oh, hopefully.
Talk a little bit too, Katie, about how do managers and senior leaders see the value of rehearsal from their perspective, right? Again, I think you guys have a great culture that is certainly bought in. I think you've talked a little bit about, there are always some people that might come into the organization that have a little bit of skepticism about, again, is this really the right investment? Talk to a little bit about just sort of how you deal with those new folks at the leadership level who will be mentors and coaches, and those who will actually, sort of participate at that level. How do you guys talk about rehearsal and sell this concept to them if they're a little bit skeptical?
It's interesting because a lot of our managers are actually internal promotions. So they were in the field and then now they're managers. And so they already know the value of practicing as a rep. They don't always like it, but they know the value. And so then when they're on the other side of it, they're like, yeah, you got to do this because it's going to make you better. So that helps a lot. But of course, we do have external hires every now and then as well. And I think it's just really, I don't know anyone who doesn't believe that practicing is a way to get better. I mean, I'm sure these people exist. Strange concept to me, but it's just something that you always grow up doing, right? If you want to get better at sports, you practice, you hopefully get better. If you want to be a better musician, you practice. If you want to be a better sales rep, you practice. And I think especially now, when we're stuck everywhere, in our houses and so far apart and unable to travel, just makes sense to be able to have a documented way to practice. And, the managers see the documentation element of it, right? It's all recorded. It's all in the system. We can go back and review past role plays. We can go back and review past coaching. So that's, that's a benefit, but it's a way for them to be able to see what their reps are saying when they can't be with them. And it's, I wish I could say we had like this magical formula for, this is why you should use rehearsal, but it's just common sense. It's just they get in, they see it, and you just can't deny that it works and that it is logical.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Um, maybe we won't go too deep into the platform, but Katie, walk us through maybe just a little bit of what components do you guys consider valuable to include when you do assignments, when you put together a scenario. Everybody hopefully just actually saw the demo that Jeff provided, so they have some basis or some grounding for the sense that there's a number of components that are at play. But Katie, walk us through a little bit when you think about, okay, great, we're going to develop a new scenario for, whether it's a let's say just, kind of some additional product training, some additional product messaging. What are all the things that you think about that should be included when you just, what am I going to give to a learner to equip them just to begin to do all this? And it doesn't just have to be things within rehearsal too, right? I'm curious about what else you're doing outside of even the rehearsal sphere that you're thinking about bringing to that learner to make sure that they have at their fingertips to be able to use it as they work on that skill or work on that particular talk track.
So one of my biggest things is to provide all of the resources they're going to need to be successful. I agree that they need to learn, where to find things on their own and where things live. But when they're just getting introduced to something or just trying to learn a new concept or topic about something they already know, I feel like if we provide them with the resources, they're going to be much more likely to use them. And I'll give you an example. So we're very traditional. We don't use a lot of the fancy features in rehearsal where, the AI and all that. Honestly, a lot of the words it doesn't understand, like we have products called Abdera and Pravina, and it just doesn't understand those words. But more than that, right, the value for us is the manager's feedback. So we don't really need a lot of the auto completion stuff because we want that interaction.
Yeah.
But we always try and provide resources to the reps. Like if we want them to use a specific brochure or a specific study, you can put it right there in the scenario and just, they can click on it, it downloads, it's beautiful. Well, for one of our role plays that we just did, we're in the middle of our national training meeting right now. We just put it out for their pre-work, and we put a link to the brochure. And I kid you not, got like a dozen emails saying, usually the brochure is like in the scenario. Is there any way you could just put it in there so we don't have to click the link and go outside of the system? I kid you not, like they were like upset that we just linked to it, heaven forbid. But I think that's for me, and I honestly, I thought they were right. So I went back to the trainer and was like, hey, let's put this in there. And we did, and it was great. And they utilized it and it was phenomenal. And I think that's one of the benefits. In the past, we've even had some of our more seasoned reps do like a best practice kind of video, and we put the video itself into the system as a resource, and we're like, hey, not sure where to start, watch this person do the scenario. And even if they memorize it verbatim, they're memorizing something great, so can't go wrong there, right?
Right.
So I think like just having those resources at their fingertips, whether it be a sales aid or a study or a way to make their own role play better or their own messaging better, I don't think you can go wrong. That's probably what we value the most, is just that ability to have everything all together and in one place.
Yep. And I think that's important. And that's kind of why I asked it, because I know you guys put a lot into your scenarios in the sense of making sure you're, like you said, you're giving them every opportunity to succeed. I always like to make sure we talk to clients about making sure that you're providing a development opportunity for them, not a task, not a, not a gotcha, not
Not a
a,
gotcha.
yep, exactly. And so I think that that's just super important that you think about it and you default to the idea of what more can I give them that would be helpful.
Exactly. And I mean, worst case scenario, right? That they have the brochures and they have the studies and they have everything they're going to need right there. It's already downloaded to their device that they're using. So
Yeah.
I don't see the harm in it.
And maybe I'm going to ask a question that, because I've seen several of the best of 3M response videos. We regularly see in your learner responses that they're engaged with the camera, but I also regularly see them looking at, maybe they printed out that brochure, or they're looking at it on their iPad and they're actually looking at it and reading it. They're mimicking very much a sort of a natural interaction. You guys are very okay with that. This is not something where, gosh, we're going to judge them. And you certainly, you can find situations where it's valuable, but we're not going to judge them that they look at their camera the whole time. You're really evaluating that skill that they are demonstrating, right? That element that you want them to look. We want everybody saying these words because we know they're important and impactful as they address, like you said, those really technical issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, talking to a screen, talking to a camera, it's not natural, right? I mean, I guess it's becoming more natural, more normal,
Right,
but
right.
it's weird. And so we don't try and make them, oh, sit up straight and make sure your proportions are in your camera. Like, we don't care.
Yep.
And if they're going to have a study on their iPad, absolutely use your iPad. Show the clinician you're talking to where it is in the study. That's one of our tools, right? Is to be able to access the studies on their iPad and send it off to the clinician if they ask for it. So
Yep.
why not use that? Same thing with if they've got a leg model or a product that they're showing and they want to demonstrate something not sticking to itself, like have the product, look at it, stick it to something, is it going to unstick? It makes sense for us for them to be as natural as they can be. And then, I mean, heck, we get them, they do it in their car when they're in between, going from hospital to hospital. So we get a lot of car shots, like in the parking lot, obviously not driving, that would be
Yep.
unsafe. But, sometimes, their dogs will make a cameo if they're at home. And that's not the important part. The important part is that they're practicing. And it's, for us, that's the value, is the practice and the ability to get feedback on what you're saying and how to make your sales pitch better, right? Like,
Yep.
we all want to improve, and salespeople, bless them, are the most competitive people I have ever met in my entire life. Huge generality.
Yep.
Prove me wrong. But they want to get better. They want to improve, right? They want to see themselves on that leaderboard at the national sales meeting. So this is just giving them one more opportunity to get better.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, no, I love that. You're right. That's the other thing I tend to see is, like, right, they submit their videos and they were all over. They're in their homes, they're in their cars, they're everywhere. And it's one of the, actually, I think it's one of the genuinely great parts of rehearsal, is that I've seen people in a busy airport, all this, everything going on behind them, and yet they're focused on that demo that they're doing, or on that response that they're giving. And I think I agree with you. I think that's a power and a testament to the competitiveness of salespeople and their desire to improve.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. And they're utilizing time that's available to them. So we love
That's
that.
right. That's right. Yep. Katie, let's talk just a little bit about kind of impact. Where have you guys seen impact? I mean, I think that's been certainly a thread throughout. And I think anybody can see that based on the fact that you guys have been doing this for as long as you have. You're not going to continue to do this without seeing impact. But what have been some of just the key impacts that you guys have seen? What have been some of the key components that have kind of come out of all of this work that just continues to drive home the message of how important this kind of work is, that being practice and coaching time?
I think for us, it's really what the reps and the managers themselves say. The managers are always the ones who are like, we love rehearsal, we love being able to give feedback, we want to, they'll even say we want to do it more. And obviously that's hugely valuable, but then the reps, bless them, we'll ask them, hey, how was that role play? And they're like, I really hate doing them, but grumble, grumble, it made me better, grumble, grumble. And they hate to
Yep.
admit it because they don't want to do it. Like,
Right.
who wants to
They
do
don't
a
want
role
more
play?
of it. Right.
Right. But they will say, like, as much as I hated doing it in the moment, like, I realized it made me better. And so I've even obviously we've had reps who've been doing this with me for 5 years, they've been here for this whole time. And now they're like, I see a rehearsal assignment come through and I know exactly how to do it, where to do it, and when I'm going to do it. And I get it done and it's great. Like, I don't struggle with it anymore. I think in the beginning, they're like, oh, I have to do this, but then they realize, right? And we can see it. So speaking of impact, there's reporting in the system, which is
Yep.
huge. I'm a big data person. And so, being able to pull the data and see those numbers for me is invaluable. And I can pull a report and I can see how many times each person practiced before they actually submitted. And it's really cool because you realize that, they're putting forth their best video, but they're doing it again and again and again and again before they put that out there. And I mean,
Yep.
with repetition, right? Like you
Yes.
just can't help but remember it if you say something over and over. And I mean, we see people practicing 5, 6, 7 times. I mean, some of them way more, some of them less.
Right.
But inevitably, like, they've practiced several times, even our seasoned reps, which tells us that everybody can still practice. It doesn't
Yep.
matter if you've been selling this your entire life. There's always ways to improve, right? So I think, just looking at all of the data, looking at our longevity and the feedback, I mean, that's really where we see the value, is that they see the value. And if they see the value in the practice, then for us, it just makes sense.
Yep. I was going to say, you maybe answered my next question already, Katie, which was going to be, what are some of the data points that you find most interesting when you go to look at, okay, let's see what happened with our most recent one. I mean, we all know everybody's going to look at completion. How many completed it? Did we get good completion numbers? Did mentors give feedback? But I was curious, and if there are any others, the great one you gave the example of course, is the number of times that a learner has recorded. And Jeff spoke about that when he did the demo, that we are counting how many times a learner will hit that record button before they finally hit submit. And that's the attempts number that I think Katie just referenced. But Katie, are there any others that you always just love to look at, whether they are valuable or anecdotal? Valuable in the sense of whether they're some real data you capture or just anecdotal data that you always just love to look at. Anything else?
So for me, so we actually do utilize, there's a section that shows if managers leave the video feedback, like if they actually give a video back to the rep, or if they just leave text comments. And we highly, highly encourage our managers to put video feedback in there. I mean, number one, the reps have to do a video, so you should too, right? Like, it's just fair.
It is.
But
it honors them.
Personal. It does. I think so. But it's
honors
more personal. And you don't feel like it's like a copy and paste situation, right? Like, they're actually talking to you. You'll hear them make comments. Oh, I saw your daughter in the background at 2 minutes. Great, way to go, not breaking contact or breaking concentration, whatever it was. So we try and encourage that. And so when I send out completion reports, I kind of call that out. I'm like, hey, look at who gave video feedback, and I'll like highlight it in green. And it draws attention to it, right? And then they'll come back, they're like, I left feedback. And I'm like, well, what's a video feedback? Maybe next time. And so they're like, okay, and then we improve the manager's feedback too, right? Because now they want to be on the green sheet or in the green column. But like, I always look, because I'm, again, data nerd. So the system sends out automatic reminders. And I am a firm believer that there are 20% of people who do assignments like the second it's released, they just want to get it done. I'm in the 20%, just saying. And then like the other, like 60 to 70% of the people do it like when they get their first reminder, which is I set it for 48 hours before it's due. And then
Okay.
there's like the last 10 to 15% who do it like the second it's due. And they're like, this is due in an hour. They're like, oh my gosh, okay, I'll do it. And I just like to look and see how true that is. And it's true every time. It's so funny to watch, you just know when the reminder emails are going out, and then you can see like who goes out and does it. I don't use it for anything, but it's fun for me because it helps, because people are like, oh, only, 200 people out of 1,000 have done their role play. I'm like, yeah, but it's not due until Friday and it's only Wednesday. Watch what happens tomorrow when that first reminder email comes out. And sure enough, that number just jumps. And so it helps me to know, like, should I be worried that not more people have done it yet? Or
That's right.
Do I know it's coming? And sure enough, it's coming.
Yep. And I think that's important. Like you said, Katie, it's, maybe it's just simply knowing what is typical for response times of learners, so that while you've got a program active, you can sort of monitor that and understand, like, oh, wait a minute, we're seeing lower numbers here. Maybe we better, push this a little bit harder on this one in particular. Maybe people are struggling with it, right? But you can at least anecdotally look at that and anticipate any issues a little bit. So I think that's an important point. Absolutely. One other question just for you here, Katie, around Impact 2 is talk a little bit about how you guys have worked with various departments and brought other departments into the mix on this. Not necessarily that they might be using it, but that they are helping in the overall effort of doing role plays. Because I know because it brought, marketing, compliance, right? All sorts of other departments that you might not typically be thinking of in terms of, a training, right? And having them actually participate and bringing them into this.
So for us, the training team trains the material that marketing creates. So marketing creates sales aids, or they'll create, whatever brochure. Even when it comes to new systems that are being launched to go with our products. And so they will create that. And then we as trainers will put out a role play around what was created or whatever new product is launched. And I mean, you mentioned compliance. I will say, we're in a very highly regulated industry, right? The devices, as everybody kind of knows now with all the masks, and it's very, very regulated. And so we have to make sure that not just that the marketing collateral that goes out to the public is completely approved by our legal and our regulatory teams, but even our training material that's internally used has to be approved, because we don't want to even give the impression that we're training to something that's not accurate. And so, like, when we first started implementing rehearsal, or we wanted to implement it, our compliance team was like, well, what do you mean they're going to be recording themselves and it's going to be online? And we're like, no, it's not online. Like, you can't go to YouTube and see these videos. Like, it's a secure platform. You have to log in, you can only see what we set it up for you to see. And they're like, well, we're not sure about that. We don't know. And so we're like, hey, why don't you take a peek? And so then they were able to see, hey, now we're able to look at this and actually hear what the reps are saying, whereas before they're just out in the field saying whatever they want to say, right? Like, we hope they're saying what we train them to say, but how do you know? Well, now this is a way to say, hey, if they can't say it right on a video role play, then clearly they're not saying it right in the field. Let's get them some extra coaching. Let's make sure that they get some training and are saying things that they're supposed to say. So it just kind of gives an extra layer of oversight. I don't know, that seems like such a negative word, but it's not a negative for us. It's a positive,
right.
That people can see, and have visibility into this, and know that, what we're doing is on the up and up, and exactly what we're supposed to be training them on, that they're practicing correctly. So I think that that's just another value to the platform and to practice, right? That you're practicing correctly, because if you're practicing wrong, that's not going to help. So it helps us to look and see.
Yeah. You can actually prove to those in the compliance department, right, that not only are we training correctly, but our reps are doing it correctly, right? We're
learning it like they should. Yeah.
And we're coaching them where they are not. So we are actually moving towards compliance, as opposed to, not that you'd move away from it, but opposed to just not knowing how much you're moving towards compliance.
And look
Yeah.
how much they've grown. They started here. Look how much better they are now that they're, 6 months into the job or whatever it is.
Yep. Yep. No, I think that's, again, and that's part of that, being part of a highly regulated industry, where I feel like I love that story that you guys have managed to get the sort of compliance team to actually embrace this, as opposed to be concerned for where it may make you vulnerable. And you've proven quite the opposite of their belief. Just for the last few minutes, Katie, would love to just hear a little bit about, so I know this because we obviously got the chance to talk about this, but you guys have a massive year coming up, Katie. You are launching an immense amount of products or product enhancements. And so I would love to hear just a little bit about how is 2022 setting up for you, in the sense of, again, how are you going to just continue to leverage Rehearsal, given you guys have such a heavy product launch year, which I'm sure is very exciting, but also very burdensome.
Yes, yes to all. So the thing this year is 22 products in 22. So there's a ton of stuff coming out, right? Like our partnership. We're now 3M. It's still kind of weird. We're like 2 years in. It's still weird. But like we're able to utilize a lot of the 3M like adhesives, right, and some of the traditional KCI products. So things are improving and changing, and it's amazing. But that's a lot for the sales reps, right? And now they're really kind of into their new products. They know the full portfolio, and so we're actually like literally in the middle of our what we call USAC training meeting, our national sales meeting for the year. And we're launching all these products and they're getting all this training, and it's super energized and pumped up and exciting, even though it's remote. That sucks, but still we're getting them excited and getting them energized, showing them all these new products. Well, then they will not go home. They're already home. Then, they log off and now they're back to doing their regular day to day. And they're like, okay, now what? I've got all this new stuff, and now what? So we literally have set up, not for this coming Monday, because our workshops are next week, but for the Monday after, I have already got it in the system. It's already set to roll. As soon as that Monday hits, they're going to get a video role play, and it's all based on what they're learning during their workshops next week at our national sales meeting. And that's, I'm sure everybody is familiar with the forgetting curve, right? So we want to make sure to bring that back up immediately. Let's bring it back to the front of their mind after just a couple of days. Let's get them talking about it. Let's get them practicing. And we're going to continue that throughout the year in order to keep bringing it back. And, we know we've got new claims and new things that are coming out, maybe a few things that the FDA is just like this close on, but we're like talking about it now because we know it's coming in the next month or two. Well, as soon as it hits, they're going to be able to start practicing that messaging and say, okay, it's here. Let's go. Let's talk about this. Let's make sure that you are ready to speak to this with your customers. So it's going to be a big year. It's exciting. We're in the middle of that huge excitement, and we're not going to let the momentum fade. We're going to use Rehearsal to keep them practicing, keep them, making sure that it's always going to stay in the front of their minds. Yeah. Hopefully that's the plan.
Yep. Yeah. I don't have any doubt that plan will come to fruition, Katie. Again, you guys just have had a number of years of success. And so we love to celebrate that. We are thankful that we have gotten to be a part of that at Rehearsal, and been one tool in the tool belt to really help you drive that. And of course, kudos to you and congratulations on such a great job and stepping into a new and even larger role at 3M. So thank you so much, Katie.